Beneath Portugal's ancient landscape lies a hidden chapter of our human story. At Gruta do Caldeiro, researchers found traces of Neanderthals and early humans. But it's what they didn't expect that changes everything: the shift from hunter-gatherers to farmers. This change wasn't just a simple evolution. It was a sweeping transformation, almost erasing the old way of life and leaving its mark on the DNA of modern Portuguese people. A discovery that connects us to the past, but also makes us question who we really are. Join us as we uncover the secrets of Portugal's genetic legacy. The name Portugal is believed to originate from the Latin portus cale. Portus means port, referring to a harbour area, and cale is thought to derive from the early settlement in the area, possibly influenced by Phoenician or Celtic terms. The Phoenicians, who were known for establishing ports and settlements along the Iberian coast, might have influenced both the language and early culture in this region, contributing to its maritime traditions. Studies have found Phoenician genetic markers scattered across the Mediterranean, with some data indicating that roughly 1 in 17 men in the broader Mediterranean region carry a distinctive Phoenician genetic signature. This pattern also appears in parts of Portugal, particularly along the coast, suggesting ancient connections through trade and settlement. Around 14,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, hunter-gatherers from the Iberian refugium spread across what is now Portugal. Genetic evidence shows that these early inhabitants carried haplogroups like H, U, and V, still detectable in modern Portuguese DNA. A 2015 study published in Science used ancient DNA analysis to confirm these migrations. Physically, these early hunter-gatherers likely had dark skin and brown eyes, as suggested by studies of Mesolithic European populations in nature. They were relatively short in stature, reflecting the survivalist nature of their environment. Today, approximately 5 to 10% of maternal lineages in modern Portuguese populations can trace back to these early pioneers. Though this proportion is higher in more rural and isolated areas where genetic continuity with ancient populations tends to be stronger. Around 7,500 years ago, Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, brought agriculture to the Iberian Peninsula. These early agriculturalists introduced new paternal haplogroups, such as G2A and E1B1B, to the genetic landscape. Studies estimate that 50% of Portuguese ancestry comes from these early farmers, though this varies significantly between regions. For instance, in more rural areas of central and southern Portugal, there is stronger continuity with Neolithic populations, whereas urban areas have experienced more genetic input from subsequent migrations. Neolithic farmers likely had lighter skin than the hunter-gatherers, but still retained dark hair and brown eyes. Their more stable agricultural lifestyles also contributed to a slight increase in height. This period left a lasting imprint on the Portuguese gene pool, especially in the more agricultural regions of Beira Baixa and Alentejo. The Copper and Bronze Ages around 4,500 years ago saw the arrival of the Bell Beaker culture, which introduced significant genetic changes to the region. A 2018 research in Nature revealed that the Bell Beakers brought the R1BM269 haplogroup, a paternal marker now found in 60% of male lineages in Portugal, particularly in northern and central regions. These migrants likely had lighter skin, and some carried genes for blue or green eyes. Their physical traits were taller stature, lighter skin, and sometimes light hair. They began to diversify the population, especially in northern Portugal, where their genetic contributions remain most visible today. During the Iron Age, Celtic tribes like the Lusitanians and Galicians settled in Portugal, further reinforcing the dominance of the R1b haplogroup, particularly in northern Portugal. Genetic studies suggest that these Celtic migrations had a stronger impact in rural northern regions, where Celtic cultural traditions persisted for centuries. The Roman conquest of Lusitania in the 2nd century BC added new layers of genetic diversity, especially in southern Portugal and coastal cities like Lisbon. Roman haplogroups, such as J2 and T, reflect Mediterranean origins and are more common in urban areas, where Romans built infrastructure and settled in larger numbers. Romans typically had olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, traits that are more prominent in these regions today. The collapse of the Roman Empire brought Germanic tribes like the Suebi and Visigoths to Portugal during the 5th and 6th centuries AD. These groups left a smaller genetic footprint compared to earlier populations, but they still introduced haplogroups like I1 and R1a, associated with Northern Europe. Studies suggest that these haplogroups are more prevalent in northern Portugal, particularly in rural areas, where genetic continuity has been less disrupted. In the 8th century, the Muslim Moors from North Africa ruled much of the Iberian Peninsula, including Portugal, for almost 500 years. Their genetic impact is most visible in southern Portugal, where haplogroups like E1b1b and J1 became prevalent. The Moors likely had darker skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, traits that are more common in southern Portugal, especially in the Alentejo and Algarve regions. Alongside the Moors, Sephardic Jews also played an important role in Portuguese history. A 2013 study found specific Jewish haplogroups, like K and H, still detectable in modern populations, especially in urban areas such as Lisbon and Porto, where Jewish communities were historically prominent. Sephardic Jews, expelled or forced to convert during the Portuguese Inquisition of 1497, likely had dark hair, dark eyes, and Mediterranean features. Today, Portugal's genetic diversity reflects the many layers of migration and settlement that shaped its history. Northern Portugal, particularly regions like Minho, shows strong influences from Celtic and Germanic populations. People in these areas tend to have lighter skin, blue or green eyes, and blonde or light brown hair, traits linked to Northern European ancestry. Rural northern regions tend to have more genetic continuity with these ancient groups, whereas urban centres in the north have experienced more recent genetic input. In central Portugal, such as in the Beiras and Douro Valley, the genetic profile is more balanced, with influences from Celtic, Roman and Moorish populations. Genetic studies show that people in central Portugal have a wide range of physical traits, from light skin and eyes in the north to darker Mediterranean features further south. Central Portugal serves as a transition zone, where diverse influences have mixed over millennia. In southern Portugal, particularly particularly in the Alentejo and Algarve regions, the influence of Neolithic farmers, Romans, Moors and Sephardic Jews is more pronounced. People here are more likely to have olive skin, dark hair and brown eyes, reflecting deep connections to Mediterranean and North African populations. The genetic diversity across Portugal mirrors the historical migrations and settlements that influenced regional surnames. For instance, northern Portugal's Celtic and Germanic ancestry reflects lighter physical traits and surnames rooted in Celtic origins. Before Roman rule, the Iberian Peninsula was inhabited by indigenous tribes, such as the Lusitanians, who spoke pre-Roman Iberian languages and established the region's early culture. Surnames from this period often relate to the land, geographic features, or local flora and fauna. The Celts inhabited parts of Iberia before Roman conquest, particularly in the northern regions, leaving behind surnames often linked to geography, tribal identity, or natural elements. These surnames often reflect Celtic reverence for nature and land. The Romans conquered Iberia around the 2nd century BC, leaving a lasting mark on the culture, language and surnames of the region. Latinized surnames from this period often reference Roman gods, occupations or noble qualities, reflecting Roman society's hierarchical structure and cultural values. Following the fall of the Roman Empire, Germanic tribes like the Visigoths ruled parts of Portugal, infusing the region with their own cultural and linguistic heritage. Germanic names often signify attributes like strength and leadership, or relate to nature and nobility. The Moors ruled Portugal from the 8th to the 12th centuries, bringing Arabic language, science and culture to the Iberian Peninsula. Arabic origin surnames often include the prefix al and are associated with nature, trades or towns. The Jewish community played an important role in Portuguese society until the Inquisition in the 15th century forced many to convert or flee. Sephardic Jewish surnames often reflect Hebrew origins or Portuguese words adopted during the Inquisition to integrate into local society. Portugal's DNA tells an interesting story of mixing between different peoples over thousands of years. The original Iberian inhabitants were joined by Romans, Germanic tribes, North African Moors, and Jewish communities, among others. Each group that settled in Portugal left their mark. You can see it today in Portuguese genes, family names, and culture. Modern Portuguese people carry this diverse heritage in their DNA, making them a living connection to many chapters of history. If you enjoyed this exploration, subscribe to our channel for more stories about the DNA of countries and cultures. Watch our other videos on genetic history around the world and dive deeper into the heritage within names, places and people. And don't forget to like, comment and share this video to help others discover the fascinating connections that shape today's world.